and our second time today to have our bishop here today. So this is really wonderful. Thank you. So Bishop Sanders Wells has been with us all weekend. She did a wonderful retreat yesterday and was here this morning for church, and now she is back again this afternoon with our retired presiding bishop. That sounds good, doesn't it? Retired presiding bishop, Michael Curry. So they are going to give their own introduction of the program, but I am here to say how delighted I am to have all of you here and to have them here with us and to lead you in prayer. So the Lord be with you. Let us pray. O God, you made us in your own image and redeemed us through Jesus, your Son. Look with compassion on the whole human family. Take away the arrogance and hatred which infect our hearts. Break down the walls that separate us. Unite us in bonds of love and work through our struggle and confusion to accomplish your purposes on earth, that in your good time all nations and races may serve you in harmony around your heavenly throne, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
So first I want to take the opportunity to thank you for traveling back to Jackson, because we know you were here recently. So thank you for traveling back.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Very glad to have you. Very glad to have you with us. As Ann mentioned in that introduction, yesterday we had a workshop on the history of us. That's what I call it, the history of us. That just takes some of the American history that we learn and gather in school and expands it so that we have a little bit more recognition of the voices that we don't always hear. And certainly part of our conversation yesterday as Mississippians was to talk about Emmett Till. And I'm going to share something with you. So shortly after I was elected, I was still living in Memphis at the time, so had not yet moved. And a reporter had called and was scheduling an interview, and we were chatting, and just all the opening stuff. And his first question for me was, "Do you realize you're moving to the place where Emmett Till was killed?" And I thought that was the oddest opening question for an interview. And I said to him, "Do you know where I live now?"
Yeah.
I said, so right this minute, you are calling me and I'm in Memphis, Tennessee, where Martin Luther King was assassinated. And if you know anything about my background, you know I'm from Mobile, Alabama, where the last recorded lynching took place. So why are you asking me if I know that I'm moving where Emmett Till was killed? And I guess I want to start our time of conversation with asking you, as somebody who's not a Mississippian, because I'm a Mississippian now.
Oh yeah.
Was Emmett Till's murder the true defining moment for the state of Mississippi? More so than Medgar Evers, more so than James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, Michael Schwerner, more so than the desegregation of Ole Miss and James Meredith. Would you say that Emmett Till's murder was more of a defining moment for Mississippi? As somebody who's not a Mississippian.
Well, I wouldn't presume to answer for Mississippians. But before I said it, thank you for having me. I'm just glad to be with y'all. I really am. Thank you. Thank you, Bishop. Clearly, it's a defining moment, certainly for Mississippi, but I have to say for the nation, and it certainly was for Black communities in the nation at the time. I mean, I was born in 1953, so I was a baby in '55 when he actually was killed. But I do remember. I remember, for example, at home. I mean, Ebony and Jet magazines were in our house. They were always there. And there was it was in a Jet that I was maybe a little bit older, but reading at that point. And I remember reading in that Jet magazine, or seeing the picture actually, that his mother told, let everybody see what was done to my child, and the picture of him in the casket. And I think it was a defining moment to a great extent for the civil rights movement as it emerged. He became a rallying cry early, almost as much as Brown versus Board of Education for Topeka, Kansas. And so it was a major moment in the life of Mississippi, but I really do think in the life of the country. I really do. The Black news media, I mean, took the story once Jet and Ebony, the Johnson publications, sent it out and published the story. It hit every local community Black newspaper. I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and my families are both from North Carolina and other families. My father's folk were from Alabama, but we were actually missionaries to the north at the time, and then it snowed, and that's when I said I'm moving south again. But anyway, that was it was. But I mean, I vaguely remember every year there was something about Emmett Till in the Challenger, which was the Black newspaper there. I mean, I used to deliver them, and there was something about him, so that I know among the Black community, and certainly among civil rights workers, he was a rallying call. Now, whether I remember it was Rosa Parks who said, or she was quoted as saying, at some point, that when she sat down in Montgomery, she was thinking about Emmett Till. I mean, so that's the level of influence that was going on, and that was in Montgomery. And so the impact of what happened to a 14-year-old child, I mean, that stung in a way that some other things had not. I mean, there were lynchings were going on all over, I mean, all over the country, actually. And yet this one of a 14-year-old boy, and when his mother made, I mean, that's a horrible decision to do, but she said, let the country see my child disfigured and beaten to death, let everybody, and that did something. It shook decent people of decency and goodwill, of all races, and that catalyzed, and it was a catalyst. Other events became even more so. And I think for Mississippi, I mean, I know that a lot of hard work has gone into working to claim our history, including the painful parts. It's like any family, you gotta claim, I mean, my wife's into genealogy and all that kind of stuff, and I remember telling her, I said, now, I know my family, and you might not want to climb up that tree too high, because because I know them now. God only knows what they're like. You keep climbing. But that's true for any community of people, for any, and I know that you all have been doing some work for a number of years. I remember being here a few years ago, and I remember back when Duncan Jr. Was bishop, you all were working on doing hard, and leadership in the state was engaged in a lot of that work. Well, the painful stuff does hurt, but it's like a family, because sometimes it's better to know what it is, to bring it to consciousness. That's good therapy, to bring it to consciousness so that you're not doing unconscious actions that are harmful to others or to self. Well, what's true for an individual or for a family is true for a community, is true for a state. And you can only change when you're aware of the past. Because then you know what you got to change. And that's just life. I mean, it's like Frank Sinatra said, that's life. And that's the way it is. And so that young boy, 14 years old, his death was a martyrdom. As I think it was Tertullian, one of the early church writers, who said the death of martyrs is the seed of the church. And the death of that martyr was the seed of a movement that has not completely changed our country, but we're better than we were. We've come a long way. And no small amount is due to Emmett Till. And because his mother did what had to be an excruciating thing to open that casket and let the picture go all over, because she did that, that memory is not repressed, but still helps us to go forward and to be better and to become all that we're supposed to be.
So I'll tell you that shortly after I moved to Mississippi, at the end of last April, I scheduled a visit with the Emmett Till Interpretive Center, which is in Sumner, a couple hours from here. And the director of that center, Patrick Weems, who is an Episcopalian also, Patrick and the board chair carved out a pretty big chunk of day to take me around to the sites. We went to what's left of the store. We went to the river where he was actually retrieved. We went to the barn.
Oh, you did?
We went to the barn. And we went to what we believe is the uncle's home. And it took us a while to do that because these places are not in close proximity to each other. They're a distance apart from each other. And we left the area where the uncle's house is to head to the barn. And it took us probably a good 20 minutes to get between those points. And I'll offer as a mom, because I am a mom, it was gut-wrenching to make that long drive, because you just imagine any young child in the back of a truck going that long distance, and certainly by that point knowing that everything his mother had told him and everything his mother had feared had just come to pass. And it was overwhelming. That was overwhelming before we ever got to the barn, the long ride, and thinking about the fear that had to be in that young child all that way. That was a lot. That was a lot. And I wonder as a person who struggles every day to do that love your neighbor as yourself thing.
Yeah.
You know, that thing that we're supposed to do,
Yeah.
that thing we've been commanded to do.
Yeah.
How do we get to a point in our world, and we know there were lots of things that led up to segregation and lynchings and all the things that happened, but how do we get to a point in our world where our sense of care for one another is just absent? That you could look at a 14-year-old boy and think, we know we're going to kill him.
You know, I do think that I think one of the most significant books that was ever written was The Invisible Man, Robert Ellison. And the reason I think that, I mean, he wasn't a psychologist, and yet he recognized the dynamic of invisibility, how it affects the person who is rendered invisible, and how it affects the person who doesn't see them. It makes it possible, if someone is invisible, if they're just a number or a collection, then what you might never do to an individual if you saw them as a person, as an individual, all of a sudden the unthinkable becomes possible. And that's part of what he was saying, both for the person who's seeing the person as invisible and for the person who's invisible, because both of them in the book, I mean, I haven't read it in years, but I mean, what I do remember was that both committed violence. That both the invisible person who was rendered invisible, in rage, was violent against those around. And those who were seeing or not seeing the person did violence against the person that was invisible because they were invisible. They were not human. You see, the dynamic of this invisibility creates something where the impossible becomes possible, the unthinkable becomes thinkable. And if, I mean, this is, I don't want to get on a tangent, but the way the invisibility dynamic works, and Ellison did say this, I mean, it's in the book. I'm surprised I'm remembering this much because I'm old now. I don't remember what I used to remember. But that dynamic is that the person who is invisible is not human. You see what I mean? So that you can do anything to them. And Ellison didn't go into that, but if you look at any over human history where cruelty and injustices were done to other people, it's because they're invisible, and they're therefore not human. And therefore, I mean, it's terrible, but there was a fly got in our house, and I went out and got a can of, I got some Raid. I mean, I was looking for something that had a more pleasant aroma, but I killed the fly. I mean, I confess, but it was a fly. And you see, when you think about it, if you think of other humans as invisible or as of no more moral significance than a fly, then the unthinkable becomes, we ask, I mean, how were the Native Americans forced removed off of their land and in many cases exterminated? How did otherwise good, decent people do it? How did Germany, I mean, one of the places of Bach and Schopenhauer and Freud, I mean, this was one of the heights of human civilization. How does a society like that turn on and massacre Jews and gypsies, homosexuals? How does that happen? I mean, you can go around the world. I mean, it's invisibility, that dynamic of rendering another invisible, is pernicious. It makes, and then Reinhold Niebuhr said, and then you put a mob together. He wrote that book, Moral Man and Immoral Society. He put a mob together, then I can give the mob my moral sensibilities. It's not Michael doing it, it's the mob that I'm a part of. And I mean, he was writing around the time of the rise of Nazism and fascism. I mean, you look at all these dynamics, and that's how otherwise good, decent people, usually, very often church-going folk, family folk, who are good family people, can somehow be complicit or look away or choose not to know and not to see. That's where Ellison, that is one of the most incredible books I think that's ever been written. It really is. It's just a remarkable book. And like I read it in 40 years, but it was just that stunning. And I think that's how it happens. I really do think that's how it happens, because there is something about if I get to know you as a person, well, I'll tell you a story. And this happened in the House of Bishops years ago. I mean, it was Frank Griswald was presiding bishop then, and I mean, I was a young bishop, and it was in the time of Bishop Gene Robinson, and so there was all the contention and struggle, and it was difficult. It was a tough time, and God bless Frank Griswold. He hung in there with us, but it was not easy. And I remember at one point we were having a house meeting. I think we were in Texas, if I remember correctly. And we were being led in conversations with each other, and the leader wanted us to go into smaller groups. And I forgot what the question was, but the question was one that would elicit every bishop, every one of us in the group, really telling our personal stories. I mean, it was specific, but telling our personal stories. One of the bishops, I remember he went to the mountain. He went, maybe he did, yeah. He went to the mountaintop, and he said, anyway, he went to the microphone, and
Did a bit of mountaintop.
a little bit of mountaintop for you, yeah, especially if you like to hear yourself talk. I mean, it's heaven. But anyway, he stood up at the microphone, and he was a bishop actually who left the Episcopal Church later. He went to the microphone, and he said, "I'm not going to do this. And let me tell you why I'm not going to do it. I know what this telling each other stories and listening to each other, you're going to make me have to like you. And I don't want to do that because I feel manipulated when that happens." Now, he was both wrong and right. Because when you really do get to know someone, as long as they're invisible, you see what I mean? If you don't know them, they're invisible. They're just flesh. That's all they are. If you don't know anything about it, he didn't want the invisible to become visible. And that dynamic, he was wrong and right at the same time. You know what I mean? He wasn't right for a right reason, but he was right. He sensed that some of his defenses might have to come down, and he might have to accept someone with whom he really disagrees virulently as a fellow child of God, as a brother, a sister, a sibling. I mean, and if he did that, then he couldn't feel all righteous. And if he did that, it would take some of the energy out of where he was. And that's what Ralph Ellison, that's probably more than you wanted to know on that. That's what he was getting at. And that he saw as the dynamic behind, and he was just dealing with racism at that point. But anything that demeans another can happen when that person is invisible or when they're seen as less than human, which basically makes them invisible as a fellow human being. And that's how it happens.
It's really interesting. Yesterday at the workshop, because I've done a lot of research around all of this stuff. This was my doctoral project, was dealing with race in the church, and I researched lots of sermons that were being preached in mainline churches, mostly between maybe 1825 and 1875. I did tons of research around sermons that might be heard. And one of the recurring themes around some of those sermons wasn't invisibility, but it was the soullessness of black people. That black people had no soul, that God did not create black people with a soul, and so therefore you follow that all the ways you want to follow that. You're really not neighbor. You're really not.
Right.
You're really not entitled to be able to participate in human life as other folks would be able to participate in human life. And so there's that piece of what you're just saying that ties rather specifically to the world of the church.
Yeah.
For all the churches that refuse to baptize enslaved persons. That wasn't us, by the way, because if you look at records of churches in this diocese, even our first bishop was baptizing the children of enslaved persons. We have all the records that tell us that persons were in fact being baptized. But the places that withheld baptism certainly would have withheld communion. How is it that looking back, we can justify is a poor word. How do we even begin to explain how it is that men of the cloth could find other human beings to be less than human?
Well, I mean, let me take the easy answer. The easy answer is St. Paul in Romans, and I think it's in chapter 3, where he just says, all have sinned. All fall short of the glory of God. And I just think that's a reality, that we're a combination of both saint and sinner inhabits. Michael, I'm both. And you're both. We're all. It depends on what choices we make, and there's a whole lot that goes into it, but we're both. And so we have capacity for profound goodness and the capacity for profound wrongness. I'm not sure that was actually a word, but you know what I mean. We have those capacities. We all. That's part of freedom. And that it just is. Now the question, I tell you, part of the question really is what dominates and what determines what we do. We make choices all day long. Sometimes we don't even make choices. We just find that why did I do that? Well, usually there's something way back, some reason that makes me do whatever I do that's just not right. It's just not right. But, human beings are complex things. Babies are cute. And I'm a grandparent now, so they really are cute. Because when they're no longer cute, you go back to your mother. But you put two babies in the little thing in just one toy, and you'll discover that sometimes that cuteness isn't always cute. That's humans. That's basically us. Was it Wadsworth said the child is the father of the man? And so what you see in children is that's kind of it. Well, that's sort of how we are, and part of the reason I believe that religious faith and spiritual life is actually important is it helps to create disciplines and practices and ways of encouraging the better angels of our nature to rise up and rule rather than the other angels. And I think that's why we do need faith. It's not because we, need churches. We don't need the money. Well, we need the money. Excuse me. Excuse me, let me take that back. Is the press still here? I didn't say that. But it's not for the money. It's not for anything that we get. It is because when those better angels are allowed to rise and rule, when that begins to happen, good can happen. Good people can do good. And the more we reinforce that and nurture that, then those good people are likely to change some things for the better. And when that happens, everybody wins. And it can happen. It has happened. It has happened. And what was your question? I forgot now. You're getting more out of me than that. It's good. You're good at this. Yeah.
Well, it is. It's an interesting dynamic, and interesting for me as I was studying a lot of these sermons to see not so much the invisibility, but I mean clearly invisible from the sense of you are not a participant in the whole world, but the violence that was attached to African persons who were here, the soullessness, and I look at this from just kind of that broader perspective of, well, if you bring someone to your country, you don't teach them the language so that they can communicate with you. You don't do anything to help incorporate them into this world other than trying to tell them to pick that cotton or to work on the tobacco. That's it. That's the end of the road. How do we as human beings, I mean, I hear your answer, but how do we as human beings dismiss other human beings to a point that we truly believe that they are worth little more to us than what we profit from them?
There was a quote, and this was Reinhold Niebuhr. I've forgotten where he said it. I mean, it was in a book, but Reinhold Niebuhr said, the human capacity for good makes democracy possible. The human capacity for evil makes democracy necessary. We have both of those capacities. God made us with that kind of freedom.
Yes.
I mean, blame God. That's why I used to tell folk, I said, when the gospel says something you don't want to agree with, I used to tell my congregation, don't blame me, blame Jesus. But you know, those human capacities, both of them are there. The capacity for goodness and the capacity for evil. Now, evil may be a more, but again, it's there. It's there in every human being. And the question is, which dominates? The Native American tradition, there's a tale of two angels, one angel on this shoulder, you know that one, and the other angel, the good angel is here, the bad angel's here, and it's just and they're both whispering in your ear. And I think it was an owl or a bird or something in the original telling. And that's really kind of true. I mean, that's what freedom is about. You have the capacity, the freedom to choose which one is going to dominate. And the more you choose one, the more it tends to dominate. I mean, that's really it. I mean, that's the core. And then you put us in groups, and it gets even more. And sometimes, this is, all right, I'm going to get in trouble for this, but, oh, I'm retired now. It's all right. The smarter you are, the more education you have, the more the capacity to rationalize, that increases, and you can actually make what is bad look like it's good. I'll give you an example from baptism. There was a debate, this would be in this early 1700s, when it was clear that slavery was going to be a means of cheap labor. And that was beginning, it was going on both in English and Spanish, and everybody was doing it. And, you know, they realized, hey, this is free labor. Anyway, so the more it was expanding, then the church thought, well, maybe we should be baptizing and introducing these folk to Christianity. I mean, both Protestant and Catholic and Anglican. I mean, everybody was in it. And there was a serious debate as to whether or not slaves should be baptized, or could they be baptized? And the debate was, as you said, was around, do they have souls? Are they people? And the debate was also about St. Paul. Now, I mean, I know some people may have issues with Paul, some of the things that Paul says, and I understand that, but my grandma had a clear, now my grandma did not go to seminary. She was a sharecropper's daughter in Eastern North Carolina. And I think I think she finished high school. I'm not absolutely sure of that, but I think she did. But grandma used to say, and if grandma said it, it had to be true, but she used to say all the time, she'd say, St. Paul's like any other preacher. He has some good sermons, and he has some not so good sermons. And his problem is they're all in the Bible. Well, Paul had some, on one of his good sermons, in Galatians, there's this, and this was the passage that really tripped them up, is in Galatians 3, where he says, all who have been baptized into Christ, have put on Christ. And there is therefore no more male or female, no more Jew or Gentile, no matter, I forgot the other categories. No more slave or free. They saw that and said, so this is where rationality, you see, can justify almost anything. They wrestled with that, and it actually was the Anglicans. It was the Bishop of London who came up with a creative solution. He said the freedom in Christ that Paul was talking about is a spiritual freedom. You see, everybody, there you go. That's right. It was a brilliant, diabolical, but brilliant, and it was the Anglican Bishop of London, anyway, who came up with that. And then everybody said, that's it, and they jumped on it. And then those who baptized could baptize knowing it didn't mean that slaves would be manumitted, would be automatically emancipated, because there's no slave or free if you are baptized in Christ. We were at Lambeth Palace. This was a couple years ago, and I was there. I guess it must. It was the primates meeting of the archbishops and the presiding bishops and the moderators of the churches that make up the Anglican community. So I was there on your behalf, and anyway, they call us primates. I hear primates, I think of National Geographic, and but anyway, the primates were meeting, and this one meeting was at, it was actually at Canterbury Cathedral. They have a retreat center there, and so we were there. But we went to London for a day at Lambeth Palace, which is the residence of the Archbishop of Canterbury. And the Church of England, and actually the government, the British government, they've constructed, it was like 7 or 8 stories high, and archives for the Church of England to be the repository of all sorts of legal papers that are related to the Church of England, their missionary work overseas, and all of that kind of stuff. It's really a magnificent thing. Well, they have the documents that were written around this baptism debate. And they actually have many of these same documents. And they have that quote where the Bishop of London quotes, actually it was his lawyer. It was his lawyer. Any lawyers in the house? It actually was the chancellor for the bishop, but then the bishop gave it a theological thing. But that's where that justification came from. We actually saw the document, it was a letter or something, but where he actually said that. Sometimes the more education, the capacity for rationalization increases. And so when you put that on top of something that's completely irrational, like any racism or any prejudice, it's going to be completely irrational. It's not a rational thing. It's something, Sigmund Freud would say that's from the id, that's from the crazy, what folks sometimes call the reptile side of the brain, not the rational, thoughtful side. It comes from that. And we had those capacities. And the question is, which angel is going to dominate?
There were a lot of those sermons.
Were they?
Yes.
Really?
There's many, many many.
Oh, yeah.
I finally just had to stop looking at
Stop
them
looking, yeah.
because there were so many.
Yeah. I don't know if you found this. I could be wrong. When I went on sabbatical, I wish I had done what you did. But what I did do was decide I was going to read sermons, 19th century sermons, early 19th century, late 17th, but early, or 18th, and then early 19th. And I did read some of the sermons. I tried to compare those who were pro-slavery and those who were anti-slavery. And the one pattern I did notice, I don't know if you saw the same thing, but I did notice that the pro-slavery arguments rarely, I mean, every once in a while they drag Jesus in, but they rarely said much. They didn't quote Jesus, love your enemies, bless those who curse you.
Oh, no.
They really didn't. They didn't quote anything about Jesus. I mean, they might have talked about salvation in some oblique way, but they didn't quote the Sermon on the Mount. They didn't quote,
No.
the Judgment Day, the sheep and the goats, Matthew 25. They didn't even talk about love. Anywhere at all. I mean, it's like they avoided Jesus like the plague. They really did. And then they misused parts of Paul.
Lots of Paul.
And
yes.
yeah, lots of Paul. And actually, it's the Pauline writings that they took and twisted them.
Slave, obey your master.
That's right.
There was a lot of that.
There's a lot of that. They avoided Jesus. Now there's a pattern here. Jesus is not helpful if your goal to enslave folk. He's not helpful at all, which tells you something. Well, anyway, that's a whole other story. But that, again, the capacity to rationalize and to come up with a strategy to justify what you want increases sometimes the more education you have. Now, ignorance can increase it too. Don't misunderstand me. I've been around, trust me. But boy, I was shocked. They only mentioned Jesus in terms of salvation. They didn't mention him in terms of no parable of the Good Samaritan. I mean, you think about it, that no lepers getting touched. I mean, half the stuff Jesus did and said, none of that was there. He died for our sins. That was there. No Simon of Cyrene carrying the cross. No go make disciples of all nations, all ethnoi, which is all stripes and types of people. No, none of that stuff. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, it's like the Gospels were let's just X those out.
Yes. Yes.
You know, and let's work with some of this other stuff. Nothing about, even Moses, where they're twisting some of the Leviticus stuff, even there, they didn't quote where in Leviticus Moses says, now go proclaim liberty to the whole world. No, they didn't quote that. That was Isaiah, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he's anointed me to preach good news to the poor, proclaim release to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty all those who are oppressed. It's in Isaiah 61. It's in, Jesus quotes it in Luke 4. They somehow missed that.
Yes.
I don't understand.
Yes.
But that's where you do see the capacity for good or evil in rationality. And you think about, well, I'll give you another example. When I was, you didn't ask for all this, but it was okay. I didn't. I was in Burundi. I was trying to think what country I was in. In Burundi, that's East Africa, sort of Central East Africa. And I was there for the, this was the enthronement of the new Archbishop of Burundi. Probably, this is 2004. And Presiding Bishop Griswald wanted to go, but because of the conflict in the communion, he didn't think it would be right for him to go. And so they wanted to identify two junior bishops and have them go. And I remember seeing that movie. I think it was a John Wayne movie, World War II. Title of the movie was They Were Expendable. And so So, because I was kind of wondering why was I selected for this mission, but anyway, so we went, and part of it, it was a wonderful thing because Burundi had been in civil war, and the civil war had been the Tutsi and Hutu, same tribal conflict that was in Rwanda. I mean, and Rwanda's right next door, so it was the same conflict. But Burundi had pretty much everybody had come to the peace table at that point, except, I forgot, one of the tribal groups had not yet come, so there was still some fighting, but they were heading in the right direction. And and so Rob O'Neill, who was the Bishop of Colorado, both of us were, 2 or 3 years in, and now I forgot what was I going to say. Anyway, so we get to the service, and then after the service, the Mothers Union, which is the only way I can describe the Mothers Union. It's pretty much all over Africa, and it is like the Episcopal Church women on steroids. I mean, it is unbelievable, and they are a force to be reckoned with. I mean, they made the church in parts of Africa get involved in ministry among people who had HIV/AIDS. That's how influential they were. I mean, they actually did. They said, bishops, you get over here and do this. Because I talked to your grandmother, and she said, you need to do that. I mean, they are something. So anyway, they had, a dinner afterward, and I met a bishop from Rwanda, and he and his wife were there, and so we were talking as we were in line. It was a buffet, and as we were in line to get our food, and I remember at one point I was saying, what? Oh no! When we finally sat down, we were eating, and I had some meat and gravy and rice and a green vegetable of some kind and a piece of bread. And so I was eating the meat and said, well, what kind of meat is this? And he went, it will make you strong, Michael. It will make you strong. I don't know what I was eating, but I feel stronger because of it. When the course of the conversation, it somehow we got into the situation, what was going on in Rwanda. And he and his wife were Hutu, which was the tribe that was killing Tutsi. And he was there to support Burundi because they had brought together a government, that coalition government that had everybody in it. And the church had done the same, actually. Both Tutsi, Hutu, and Pygmy was the third group. That's what. And all the bishops are one of those three groups, and they're learning to work together. And so he was just telling me his story, and somehow, I kept asking a question because this was incredible. I said, well, how did you survive through the horror? And he said, well, first of all, I'm a Christian. I'm waiting for more. And he said, I do ask myself, what would Jesus do? Wow. And then he went on and explained that we had to do as Christ did and would do through me if his Spirit is living in me. And so we had to, all we could do was to take in people who were Tutsi. And I found out later, he didn't tell me all of this, but I found out later from Benjamin Musaka Lubega, who was at Trinity Wall Street, and he was with us, that this man, Onesta Ferron, had been hiding Tutsis for years. He was the bishop of a diocese, and he used churches where he knew it may have been a Hutu pastor, but this was somebody who, it was like an underground railroad. And I said, man, I have met a Christian. The capacity for evil is there, but this man stood against his own tribe, and that's deep stuff. But he did it because of Jesus. I said, wow, I met a Christian. And there are a lot more.
Yes.
There are a lot more. And I got a feeling some of them are sitting in this room. I know they are, looking at them.
Well, we know that as we've gone back to talk about slavery in this country and some of the things that fed from slavery, because segregation and this whole soullessness stuff, that carried through beyond emancipation, whatever emancipation was supposed to mean. Don't ask me that question, because I'll tell you what emancipation didn't mean.
That's the lawyer in you, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. But those things kind of rested within communities. Because long after slavery's over, people were still, oh, but you can't be my neighbor. So we still have restrictions on where people live and where they can work and where their children can go to school or not go to school. So all of those things carry forward, and that's how we get to an Emmett Till story, right?
Yeah.
This is how we get there. We get there because there's already a predisposition within communities that this soulless person is not supposed to come into contact with me.
Right.
And that, it took a long time for that to even begin to dissipate. But then I also think, I look at history and I want history to mean a little bit more, because I realize that it's not that long ago. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, we're talking about history that's not that old.
Yeah. Yeah.
And wanting generations of families to own their own stories about why they have that deep-seated fear of neighbor, because it's deep-seated in so many people. And we want to think history has moved us forward to a point that maybe we can stop doing that, but it still seems to be kind of deep-seated in us. That not so good angel seems to talk to us a lot. How does the church, the institution of the church, help to address this? What are the concrete things we can do, other than we're trying to have conversation, we're trying to have more conversation? What are the concrete things that we can do as the institution that is the church? Because I'll also offer that I think that part of the reason we are where we are is that the institution that is the big C church didn't do a whole lot.
Who gave cover? Very often gave cover. There were always, I was saying very often that church as institution gave cover to what was going on. I mean, but there were people who didn't in the church, and there were voices in the church who didn't. But they were, they were sometimes persecuted. Now in America, what that meant was the pastor lost their job.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that that happened everywhere. And did. A good friend of mine, Charles Marsh, who's actually from Mississippi, but I don't remember where. But he's a theologian. He's teaching at University of Virginia, and has done a lot of writing, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and on civil rights done. Actually, Google, I guess that's the right word, Google Charles Marsh. He's a writer worth reading. He actually is an Episcopalian now, but he grew up Baptist. His father was Baptist and pastored a church here and got involved in voting rights. And he eventually was forced to leave Mississippi, and I don't remember where they went after that. But Charles is a thoughtful writer, and somebody worth reading, worth Charles Marsh. What was the question again?
What are some concrete things that the institutional church might do
I do think
today?
today, I mean, well, I know that, and I don't know where some of the work is here in Mississippi in the diocese, but I know that you've been doing a lot of work, both with Episcopalians around anti-racism work and that kind of stuff. I know that you've been doing, I was here for something a couple years ago. It was before the pandemic, if I remember correctly. Okay, it was before the pandemic. But to continue to some of that kind of work, where we have sometimes difficult conversations, and have them in a context where love is a commitment, which means we can have difficult conversations because we are a family. I mean, we may be dysfunctional, but we're a family. You know, I mean, but you can have, it becomes a container where we can have the tough conversations, where we can look at our past history. I know a number of churches in the diocese here over the years have done the kind of research of records, what has our participation in the legacy of slavery and that kind of thing. That work has continued. And I know that there's been a lot of work. I know I didn't get a chance to go to the museum, the Civil Rights Museum here, but I know that the Episcopal Church has their sections that were there because of the Episcopal Church.
Right.
Well, that kind of thing, keep going, keep doing it, but also there are opportunities in local communities, every local community, for people of goodwill to come together around issues and concerns that have to do with race and disenfranchisement of people. I forgot who it was. It was one of the British prime ministers said the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Mm-hmm. And you know, there's a lot of truth to that. If good people would rise up, and I know sometimes the other voices drown us out. I know that, but I think the more good people, Desmond Tutu's got a book on goodness. The more good comes together, the more good actually can happen. And so I think of ways that our congregations, our churches, can be in relationship with other churches or faith communities that are different, and come together to work, whether it's building habitat houses or just eating food together. You know, I mean, just eating food together. I mean, breaking bread. Why not do that kind of thing? And don't necessarily have to agree with them. I mean, just because we break bread doesn't mean we have to agree on everything. I mean, that's like families break bread together. I don't know about your family, but my family doesn't necessarily. When we have family reunions, there's some topics, and no need in going there. just leave it alone. But those kinds of things, and I know that a lot of work has gone into researching slavery and what's been our participation. And a number of dioceses, that's happening around the church, and we finally, it took a while, but set up a fund now. I'm actually have been retired for a number of months, but it's the Coalition for something for racial equity and justice.
Yeah, equity and.
Yeah, it had a name only a committee could have given it, but the Episcopal Church we committed ourselves over a period of time that a certain percentage of the church-wide budget is set aside for this work on racial justice and equity. And when I talked, the first time I brought it up, it was an executive council, I guess it was, a while back, and Gay Jennings was with me all the way. We really did. I said, you know something, we need something that makes the work of racial reconciliation and justice something that we're committed to as long as we are the Episcopal Church. And I said, when Michael Curry is dead and gone, that work needs to go on because it's the work of Christ's church. That's what that is. It's not the work of any individuals or any generation. It's the work of the future. And when racism is no more, I know human beings well enough, we'll come up with something else. There'll be something else again. And but all of that kind of work. But I really do believe that people to people, congregation to congregation, or community to community, working together, whether it is just breaking bread together, across our differences, and just letting every meal be Thanksgiving, where there's just some stuff you don't need to talk about right now. You know, let's just eat. And let's talk about football. Well, maybe not football, but we'll find something. Soccer, that would work. And then maybe the day will come when you can talk about football, when you actually know each other. Maybe, you know what I mean? And something happened. I believe this nation will only ultimately heal. I mean, there are obviously legislative things that need to happen, and I mean, I'm not naive, but I know that. But I know that this nation will ultimately only heal when neighbor comes to know neighbor and learns when Jesus said, love your neighbor, he really meant it. And that's when this nation will heal. I remember during the, it was during the pandemic. At some point during the pandemic, I was invited to talk to, I've forgotten now what it was, a conference, but it was online. I mean, it was online during the pandemic. And the question was, is e pluribus unum possible? You know, from many one, is that possible? And so I was asked to speak, and it was going to be online. It was just a online thing. And so I got Chuck Robertson on our staff, who actually is a scholar. I figured, let me get somebody who actually knows something to actually work on this for me. I said, you know, I mean, I know where e pluribus unum comes from. I was in the 5th grade. This is a side show, but I was in the Miss Lenny's 5th grade. This is in Buffalo, and there had been some early desegregation plan for the schools. This is 1963. And so most of the black community lived in East Buffalo. I mean, actually, all of it lived in East Buffalo. Everybody lived in East Buffalo. One section of East Buffalo was assigned to a school on the other side of Main Street, which was like crossing the railroad tracks. And so we had to go from the schools we were in on this side of Main Street and cross Main Street. It wasn't that far, but it was two different worlds, but it wasn't really that far when you look back at it. Anyway, and so we went to what was an all-white school then, which was in an Italian neighborhood. So it was an Italian school. One thing I still remember to this day, when we would get out of school, like at 3 o'clock, the grandmothers would be cooking, and you could smell the sauce. I mean, I almost invited myself to dinner at several homes. I mean, you could just smell, it was just incredible. But anyway, so we were assigned to the school, and I was in 5th grade, Miss Lenny's 5th grade class, and she had immigrated to the U.S. She was a kid, so I don't know, I mean, how long it had been, but she immigrated from Scotland, excuse me, and she would tell stories of Scotland and all that kind of stuff, and then she would talk about this country, and she loved this country. I mean, she really did it. She loved Scotland. That was home, but she loved this country, and when we did social studies, she would tell you why she loved. And I don't think she was doing it just because they had brought together this, you know, black and white kids together in this class. I don't know. Maybe it may have been a strategy on her part. I had no idea. Well, it was in that class that we learned about e pluribus unum, and she taught us, and we got, you know, the seal, great seal with the eagle and all that, and you know, we colored in the eagle, and then e pluribus unum was kind of on the banner, and so we colored the letters with different colors. You know, he try to make yours impressive, and you know, it's a great seal. It's the one with the eagle in Italians, he's got arrows in one and olive branches in the other, and up above is e pluribus unum. And the eagle's an impressive. I mean, actually, that's an impressive creature. Ben Franklin, who I always thought was an intelligent man, but he wanted it to be a turkey instead of the eagle. And he really did. It's like, thank God. This is one time Congress did the right thing. They said, you got to be kidding. I mean, you got to be kidding. And so anyway, so we colored in the turkey, I mean, the eagle and all that. And so I went back. So I knew that, and I vaguely remembered Miss Lenny saying something about Cicero from the Roman Republic, and I vaguely remembered that. But again, not any more than that, that it came from his writings, and the founders got it from him. And so I asked Chuck to do a little bit more research. I said I probably need to sound a little bit more intelligent than what I remember from 5th grade. And we found out, verified that Cicero was the key. Believe it or not, there was a Swiss guy who had a magazine in those days. This is probably more than you wanted, but anyway, had a magazine, and he had an article about Cicero and E Pluribus Unum, and where Cicero had written about it. Well, we did that, just digging, and found out, well, wait a minute, there was a prehistory before Cicero, that actually the phrase E Pluribus Unum turns up in one of the poems of the Roman poet Virgil. Now, whether Cicero, took it from it, who knows? Well, Virgil used the phrase E pluribus unum, from many one, which for us, from many diverse and different people, one nation, one people, one nation. Well, Cicero used the phrase from many one, E pluribus unum. This is what he was talking about. He was talking about, it was a recipe for pesto. It really was. And you think about it, pesto is basically a bunch of nuts and berries. And I said, that explains the United States completely. A bunch of nuts and berries, you put it all in one thing. And I said, if that's the accurate prehistory, that really does say a lot. But anyway, so I realized you had Virgil, and then if Cicero really did pick it up from Virgil, which is possible, Cicero did use it in one of his writings. He wasn't talking about governments or polity. He was talking about the constitution of the Roman household. And the notion of the Roman household was not just people who were blood kin. It was all sorts of people who lived kind of in the same household. Some were free and some were not. But then some were born and some were adopted in. And he said, and this is what Cicero actually did write, when one person loves the other as much as he loves himself, then E pluribus unum becomes possible. Then America becomes possible. Then a new world becomes possible. And then there are no more invisible people. And then you have a different world, a different country, a different Mississippi, a different Jackson, a different North Carolina, different Buffalo, a different church. Then you have a world worth giving to our children and generations yet born.
So many thoughts run through my mind as I'm listening to you. There's one thing you spoke about, legislative relief. Mm-hmm. We're going to come back to that one, because I want to come back to that one. I do want to come back to that. But I want to touch on something else, because this whole notion, okay, yes, when we are capable of that kind of love, yes, when we are capable of that kind of love, it's transformative. It is transformative love. I'm going to share something with you. So the federal judge in Memphis who issued the mandated busing order in Memphis, which probably was about 1971, maybe 70 or 71, who was an ardent Episcopalian, I might add. He issued that mandated busing order, which actually ended up, I'm choosing my words here, it actually ended up changing the face of schools. Because what happened was, in his own words, well after this event had taken place, I mean, this was probably 30 years after he issued that order, and he was giving an interview. And he commented, "I'm not sorry that I did what I did, because I needed to issue that mandated busing order, and I needed to try to get people together. I needed to try to do that. What I wasn't anticipating was that all the white people would leave.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so, if you looked at pictures of classrooms in a school, let's take a school that had been an all-white school before the busing order, and then after the busing order. The all-white school was that all-white school in 1955 or whatever, but by the time that busing order had been issued, it was suddenly almost an all-black school. And I'm curious what you think about how love fits into that.
Oh.
Okay. Because Bishop Curry's sermons are outstanding. Yes, they are.
That's priceless. Yeah, I mean, I came here, rode here with some folk. I don't know if Andy and
Yeah, he's back there.
Is he back there?
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. Oh, yeah, we rode from
Haneyville.
Oh, Haneyville. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Where were we? We were in Haneyville, and we had a good time in the event, in the van coming back. And but we had been there for the for Jonathan Daniels and the Martyrs of Alabama for that commemoration, and I was very aware of the need to be pragmatically idealistic in this work. Pragmatically idealistic. You must have ideals that are lofty and worthy of striving for. And you must also be hard-headed and hard-nosed and pragmatic about the realities that these ideals must be lived in. And therefore, because if you don't have one or the other, if you just have lofty ideals, and that's all they are, well, that's like a platonic form. It's just something floating up there in the ether, and it's nice. Or if you're just pragmatic, you don't necessarily go forward. You just keep things, you could just keep things going. You see what I'm saying? You've got to be pragmatically idealistic, I think. It's Howard Thurman's autobiography is called With Head and Heart. You must have both head and heart. And it must be both. It can't be just one. I think the Lord was thinking about that when in Deuteronomy in the Old Testament from Moses and then Jesus in the New, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart
and all your
mind, soul, and everything. Like Billie Holiday had a song, All of Me, why not take all of me? Love the Lord with all of me. Not just part, all of it. So I say all of that to say that you need all of that in order to do the work of reconciliation and justice. And it needs to be both. It can't be either or. Because I think, this is me talking, I really do believe that this is the work of God. And yet God doesn't force us to change, which means a movement. That's why I was talking about Jesus' movement for years, helping the church see it's really as a movement. It's not, the institution serves a movement, not the other way around. But that you've got to have a pragmatic sense that the reality is you're going to make some progress and there's going to be pushback.
Yes.
There's no way 2 steps forward and 1 step back. That's how progress is not linear. It's zigzag. It is. It always has been. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, I plan on that. I got some questions for the Lord when I get there, but and that's one of them. Could you have made the road a little easier? You know, he could have. Well, no. If I get there, I'm just gonna be so happy to be there. I won't. I won't press. But that progress is not. No. But the reality of sin, the reality of evil, and the reality of the human capacity, both for good and for evil, means that evil's going to sometimes rear up again. You make progress, and there's going to be pushback. Make progress, and there's going to be pushback. And that it's a long struggle. But progress can be made. But there used to be a spiritual of the slaves that I think embeds that wisdom. It says, keep an inching along like an inchworm. Keep an inching along. And Howard Thurman has a meditation on that spiritual, which sounds like keep an inching along like an inchworm. And he says in this meditation, you ever watch a worm go forward? They stretch out, they pull their back up, and they stretch out some more, they pull their back up, and when it starts raining, they get pushed back, and they stretch out again and pull forward. They keep an inching along like an inchworm. That was from slaves who were not free, and for whom freedom was not even a dream. It was so far a fond hope that they didn't think they would ever see. And yet they said, keep an inching along like an inchworm. Like an inchworm, and you got pushed back. Inchworm. That's how progress happens. It's not you just go and it stays like it is. Oh, we got it, we made it. Barack Obama was president. Lord have mercy. I couldn't believe it. There were black folk living in the White House. I said, Lord, this must be the kingdom. This has got to be it. Jesus is good. And yet that was progress. It did happen. I wish my grandma had been alive to see it. And yet there was pushback, and I should have realized there would be. Of course there would be. And yet we keep moving forward. And there may be back, and you keep moving forward like that old inchworm. But the one thing you don't do is quit moving forward.
Yep.
And I'm gonna tell you something. That's why I go to church. I mean, I worship the Lord and all that. I mean, I do that. But I mean, let me be clear. I mean, I recite the creed and all that. I mean, I'm a good Episcopalian. But I go to church because I know Michael can give up. And I know. I mean, I couldn't. You get frustrated. You say, Lord have mercy. I can't believe we're back here. I mean, I can't believe we're back doing wrestling with some of the same stuff I thought we had fixed. But in order to engage, understand, that's the nature of reality. That is the nature of a world that is a mixture of good and bad. That is. And the Bible told us that. I mean, I should know it. I should have known it. My grandma never did understand. How come you got to go to school to preach? She was old Baptist, and she said, well, you're supposed to just get up and go preach. I guess she was wondering, is there something wrong with me? I had to go to seminary for 3 years. What's wrong with you? You're supposed to get up and preach. But, the truth is, Scripture's been telling us the Hebrew slaves didn't get free overnight. It was a long struggle. All those stories of plagues, that was a civil rights struggle. Those were protests. Sometimes God protesting. And that's what's going on. And they get free. Then they get out in the wilderness and they get mad at Moses. That's human beings. You see what I mean? That kind of complexity is us. And yet you keep going. You keep going for that vision of that promised land, and you don't quit until God quits. And God will not quit. And I need to go to church. I need to be with y'all in church. And I need to hear somebody preaching something. My grandma and grandma used to wonder, when do y'all know somebody's got the Holy Ghost in your church? And I said, well, Grandma, there may not be anything demonstrative. But after my daddy actually told her once, he said, everyone already has the Holy Ghost. They don't need to demonstrate it. They just, I said, that's a cop-out, but it'll work for a while. I mean, give it your best shot. But that's what I need that word. I need that sacrament. I need the community of faith, because Michael will give up. Because when an old gospel song says the road is rough and the going gets tough, when that is the case, it's easy just to give up. It is. We're human. I mean, even Jesus was fussing with the Father on the cross. If I had been Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, you know, when he was praying, I mean, do y'all know that story, Garden of Gethsemane? Praying, you know, the night before. Please tell me y'all know that story. Oh, yeah. Whew. Okay, I was going to say, you got some work to do. Yeah. But if I had been Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, you know, Peter, James, and John were over there sleeping, and if I would have told the Lord, look, I got a plan. Instead of me getting crucified, why don't you take one of those three? I mean, we can.
Because they were napping anyway.
Yeah, they're already asleep. But it is a difficult struggle, and it always has been. And probably I should have known it all along, because our salvation happened on a cross. A struggle. He struggled. He carried a cross. He was tortured by an empire. And yet, he got up on Easter morning. They thought he was down for the count, but he rose from the dead. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be here. And if that's true, then I can get up and keep on going. That's why I need church. I think that's why we need church, to keep on going and not to give up. Winston Churchill was right. Never give up.
So you've probably answered where I was going to go with my question around legislation, because what got me started doing the work that I did for my D-men was this sense of, so we had the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution, those Reconstruction amendments that all happened between 1865 and 1870, where we emancipated the enslaved persons, we gave them due process, equal protection, we gave them the right to vote, and then we immediately, because we just had to see how that was actually going to play out.
Right.
And Mississippi sends someone to the U.S. Senate, Hiram Revels.
That's right. That's right.
And we had to see how that was going to play out. And as soon as we saw how that was going to play out, it was as if those three amendments had not ever happened. And then we get to 1964, 65, 66 with a new Civil Rights Act and a new Voting Rights Act and a new Fair Housing Act 100 years later. But we had to keep going.
Like the inchworm.
Got to keep going.
Like the inchworm. Like the inchworm.
Well, and there was a lot of folks that were helping to keep going.
Yeah.
A lot of folks believed. A lot of folks believed, and had faith that some of us might question, where do you even get that faith?
Yeah.
In the midst of all of the things that were happening, which were many. And now I'm going to turn to something that's a little dark, you know, as we're getting ready to close down our time. Something that's a little more dark, because I want to ask this. I feel like I really want to ask this.
I get nervous when the lawyer says, yes, Bishop.
I'm a former lawyer.
Former lawyer, that's good, yeah.
So part of what was going on with Emmett Till was what already had come about in this country, what I'm going to just call the dangerous black man trope, because I don't have a better way of describing it. That if someone saw a black man, they needed to be concerned about their well-being, they needed to protect themselves, certainly needed to protect their women, to not allow anything to happen to them because that black man was dangerous. And so we see that, kind of coming out of the Emmett Till story, but that wasn't the end of it, because that dangerous black man trope has continued on. Because we still see that coming about in places. Folks might remember the Susan Smith story, the woman who drowned her sons and claimed that a black man had drowned her sons. And that got reprised by a woman in Texas who claimed that a black man had carjacked her car. And that was what had happened to her child. So everything from the Scottsboro Boys to the Central Park Five, who, oh, by the way, there was no evidence to attach the Central Park Five to anything for which they had been accused, and the man who actually committed the crime was not a black man. Okay? How do we ever get on the other side of the dangerous black man trope? And I guess I'm also thinking about Christian Cooper and his dog. Oh, no, I'm sorry, encountering the woman with the dog in the ramble in Central Park, where she suddenly was in danger when he just said, please put your dog on a leash because you're in an area of the park where your dog is supposed to be on leash and not off leash. And he had done nothing to her. Help me with why this is still happening. Why is this still happening? And what do we as people of God, other than that whole love thing, I know you told us the whole love thing.
All right, get that, yeah.
Got the love thing. But how do we live to get on the other side of that dangerous black man trope?
You see, it gets complicated.
Well, yes. Well, yes. Well, yes.
Okay, all right. But it gets complicated because there are dangerous people.
They're not just black.
And I know that. I said people. I just said people. Just people. Hold on. This is like talking to Perry Mason. This is like there are dangerous people. They're not always who we think they are. I get that. But there are dangerous people. And yet you can't live by fearing everybody who is profiled a certain way. I understand that. So how do you, on the one hand, balance not being appropriately afraid in a situation from your prejudice? Now, I have them too, trust me. Your prejudice against a group, in this case, young black men, usually. How do you do that? Well, I think Jesus may be helpful. He said in one of his, I can't remember exactly, it's in Matthew. I know that, forgot which chapter and verse. He talked about be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. As wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. That's Jesus. Which means using the brain as well as the heart. Dr. King preached a sermon on that text that he titled, Having a Tough Mind and a Tender Heart. that you got to have a good mind and pay attention to the context and situation you're in, and use that head to say, now, am I just buying into my prejudices? Is this just the fear? Is that going on? Or am I really in danger? Tough mind, but a tender heart that realizes these are people. And I'm not going to put myself in jeopardy until I know which one. I think we have to do that all the time. But we have to realize that when I just sort of, I forgot what the word is they use in the police, profile. In the profile, if I just profile somebody just because they happen to be a young black man or a group of young black men, even more, that's as irrational, you see what I mean, as thinking they're good and sweet too. No, there are some dangerous folk out there, but they're not all black. There actually are. I don't know if y'all have ever been to a prison, but it's a beloved community of great diversity. I mean, trust me, I've been in them. I'm telling you, it really is. Everybody's in there, and yet the truth is, you've got to. In the New Testament, there's a word, discernment. Mm-hmm. You've got to use discernment to see, is this a moment of danger, or is this my irrational side automatically profiling a person? And that's something you have to do moment by moment. I mean, there's no way around that. And because human beings have always done. We've done that since we all lived in the forest. I mean, that's part of our ancestry. It's part of our anthropological makeup. Having said all of that, the tender heart must have a role as well. And I don't mean sentimentality. I mean an openness to learn about another person. My daddy used to say, don't judge a book by its cover, right. Read the book. And we have to learn to read the book when we can. You can't always do that on the street. If I see a bunch of young brothers on a dark street at my age of 72 years old, I can't outrun them. I'll give it my best shot, but I can't do that anymore. And I can't outfight them if I have to. So I'm going to do what is the smart thing to do in this situation. Now, I'm just talking about if I see some young bloods, as we used to say, and their pants are on their behind hanging down, I'm going to be aware of their presence. And I'm going to find what is the sensible thing to do in this situation. If it's just me and them on the street, I'm going to be sensible. Now, I'm not assuming they're bad, because I know they may be just fine. They're just teenagers or something. But I'm not going to risk. If it's just me and them on a dark street, first of all, I shouldn't have been on a dark street anyway. All right? See, that's where some rationality needs to come into play. But if I'm stuck, I'm going to do what is wise and smart in that situation and not provoke anything. And I'm going to keep on walking. But the reality is, you got to do two things at once. On the one hand, you do have to be safe in those kind of situations. I mean, and on the other hand, you have to ask, do I just react to this because they're black and young? And do I just automatically assume that if you're black and young and your pants are kind of hanging off your behind, that means you're dangerous? And that's interior work that we have to do. And have to say, you know, I can't judge the book by the cover, but I don't need to be no fool either. And I wish I could give you a better answer than that, but I don't think there is one. Because we live. See, the thing is, it's not just black people who are criminals.
Oh, yes.
And that's the reality. And yet there's some context where you got to be careful, but not judgmental. And being careful and non-judgmental is just being careful. Now, somebody would say, you've already made a judgment. Well, you just made a judgment to be safe. And if the time comes to get to know somebody, get to know them and read the book. I want to thank you for that question, and yeah, thank you, Perry Mason. You know, I mean, the reality is there's no easy answer because you do have to be safe. You know, if you're on the street corner, I mean, not just every day kind of stuff. You're just by yourself, you got to be safe. I got 2 daughters. We taught them to be safe and to be smart. And to be wise. Wise as that's Jesus, wise as a serpent. Don't be naive, but don't let not being naive turn into be a prejudice or a profiling. That takes some work. I mean, that's not easy. But at least to be conscious and aware that you're doing that work, that's heading in the right direction. This may be helpful. This was from Frank Griswald when he was presiding bishop. Frank used to always quote the early church fathers and mothers and their theology and all that kind of. We always used to tease him about it because he was always quoting somebody from the 3rd century who lived in the desert or whatever. Anyway, he was always. And he at one time, and I don't know why I remember this, one time in one of his addresses to the bishops, said the early ancestors in faith, in their writings, say that awareness is salvation. Not being right, but that awareness is salvation. Lack of awareness is damnation. We must be aware of the situation and of ourselves. And out of that awareness may come a way forward. And not to just give in to blind fear. Be as wise as a serpent, and yet at the same time innocent as a dove. That's about as best I can give you.
I'm going to be stewing on that for a while.
Good. Oh,
yeah,
good.
I'm going to be
I'm
stewing.
retired. All you have to do is just pick up the phone and say, I've been stewing on that. But actually, yeah, I think you really are. I think that's the key.
Because I'm struggling with how I reconcile that with seeking and serving Christ in all persons and loving my neighbor as myself. But that's...
Live with it, yeah. We live in that tension.
Yes.
We do. My grandma used to say, I don't know why I keep quoting my grandmother a lot tonight, but anyway, my grandma used to say, Bible says be a fool for Christ. It doesn't say be a damn fool. Grandma had all sorts of those, I get that. You would have liked her.
I'm sure I would have. What do you wish I had asked you that I didn't ask you?
About the Buffalo Bills.
No, I mean about Emmett Till. No,
about Emmett Till. Oh, okay. God, you've really asked, you've asked extraordinary questions. Really, I don't, it's, well, the old saying of, I can't remember who said it, George, forgotten it, those who do not remember their history are condemned to repeat it. Mm-hmm. And I think that is true. And that goes with the awareness thing that Frank Griswald was talking about, that at least to be aware that we've got a history and we must always be vigilant. For example, we must be vigilant I believe, so that we don't repeat the same things, if not in race, to whether it's the LGBTQ community, whether it's women, whether it's trans folk, whether it's Democrats and Republicans or Republicans. I mean, you know what I mean? Anybody, turning anybody. There was Martin Buber was a Jewish rabbi who just wrote some incredible theology. I don't know, one of his books called I, Thou. And in that book, he talks about relationships. And he said, when a relationship with another is an I-it relationship, when that other person is it, then shameful evil is possible. But when that person is thou, created in the image of God, as the Bible says, that changes the equation for the good. And my hope and dream is one day we will all learn how to treat each other as thou. And I know that's an ideal. But doggone it, we got to strive to get there. Because otherwise we just wallow in the mud together. Don't give up. Don't give up. And don't quit. And keep going to church. Keep going to church, synagogue, mosque, where. Go somewhere that gets you close to God. Because we can't do it by ourselves. We need God, and Lord knows we need each other. And we're going to make it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Your fan club.
Wow. My God. Yellow. Wow.
So since you're all standing, look for those prayers. Look for those prayers. Because we can't have a holy time like this and end it any other way other than prayer. So, how we'll break this up? Why don't you start us?
You want me to start? Okay.
Yep. And then I'll take this, and then you take that.
Okay.
And then we'll just, we'll see how the Spirit moves us.
Okay, yes.
Yes. How's that?
Yeah, blame it on the Spirit if we mess up. There we go.
It will all be fine.
It will, okay.
It will all be fine.
God, our Creator, you have made all humankind in your image and likeness. We give thanks that we are all your people, beautifully and wonderfully made in the many races and cultures that dwell on your earth.
We acknowledge together our fault in not always seeing one another as your children and in failing to see one another as worthy of your grace and mercy. Thus says the Lord of hosts, render true judgments, show kindness and mercy to one another. Do not oppress the widow, the orphan, the alien, or the poor, and do not devise evil in your hearts against one another. We mourn our sisters and brothers who were enslaved, bound in chains, brought to a new and unfamiliar land, bought and sold as chattel, and who suffered hard labor while others profited. We mourn the fact that among our sisters and brothers who came before us in North America are some who for more than 250 years took part in the slave trade, owned enslaved persons, or otherwise profited from the institution of slavery here. We grieve that our sisters and brothers were denied the very rights upon which this country was founded, and even 100 years after enslaved persons in the United States were granted their emancipation, our federal, state, and local governments perpetuated laws that allowed God's people to be treated unfairly and unequally, and that our churches and religious leaders often fail to stand with the oppressed, to demand an end to oppression. To that end, even today, the lingering effects of failure to love our neighbors as ourselves have allowed poverty and disenfranchisement to engulf our sisters and brothers, particularly our neighbors of color, in underserved communities around us. Lord, forgive us.
We ask your forgiveness for our sins and commission and omission.
And we beg the forgiveness of our neighbors.
And will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. We praise you for all the saints of all races and faiths who have walked before us and given their lives to secure freedom from oppression in marches and on buses, in courtrooms and at lunch counters, in schools and places of public accommodation. We thank you for their witness and faithfulness. We grieve the lives lost in violent acts that we have committed against one another when we have failed to see all of your children as being made in your image and likeness and entitled to your love and mercy. And we ask your forgiveness for the moments in which we still struggle to seek and serve Christ in all persons and love our neighbors as ourselves. Lord, forgive us.
We ask God's forgiveness for our sins of commission and omission, and we beg the forgiveness of our neighbors. For the word of the Lord is upright, and all his work is done in faithfulness. He loves righteousness and justice. The earth is full of the steadfast love of the Lord. God, in your mercy, grant us grace to see one another as you see us all, humankind made in your image and likeness. Forgive us all our sins. Help us to undertake the difficult and long overdue task of being in honest conversation with one another. Restore us to right relationship with you and with one another, so that our wounds may be healed, and refresh us and renew us for the work that lies ahead, so that hand in hand we may labor together to help your kingdom come.
Spirit of God, empower and strengthen us. Make us conscious of the ways in which our blindness prevents us from seeing systems of oppression that continue to harm any of your people, and help us stand together to eradicate the lingering effects of racism that cripple our communities.
Spirit of God, empower and strengthen us. Help us to recommit ourselves that we may resist oppression in the name of your love and seek for all your children the blessed liberty found in you, so that all of your people may know your justice and righteousness.
Spirit of God, empower and strengthen us. Lord, you have surrounded us with a great crowd of witnesses. We remember before you this day those whose lives were traded for a few pieces of silver, those who labored without fair wages to help build a nation, and those like your child Emmett, whose lives on earth ended in violence as we struggled to see one another as neighbors and not as threats. May the souls of all the departed, through the mercies of God, rest in peace.
Spirit of God, empower and strengthen us. He has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God? Lord, have mercy.
Lord, have mercy.
Thank you all for filling up this church, for taking time out of your day to come and join us. We are so grateful for your presence and your engagement. Thank you so much.
Thank you.